Hey, Sabrina Monarch here to talk to you about the upcoming new moon in Virgo that is also the start of eclipse season. So, this new moon in Virgo is happening on August 22nd or 23rd, depending on your time zone. And it's really like, let me just show you the chart. It's fascinating to me. It's in the 0 degree of the sign, and then it is also the head or the apex of a yod between Saturn, Neptune in early Aries and Pluto in early Aquarius. And then the new moon also squares Uranus in Gemini. So we have a already very sensitive, perceptive, tapped into subtle shifts and changes sign like Virgo being a live wire for transpersonal beyond outer planetary energy. So, my big idea when I look at this is that there is a real opportunity during this time to be shifting into more resourced timelines for ourselves. So, an energetic that you might play with is just noticing how you get vision and inspiration, how you assess your next steps in your day or in your life when you are in states of pleasure and joy, when you are well fed, when you have routines or habits or a way of living that you feel nourished by. And without even getting overwhelmed about getting all those details configured and figured out in some kind of complete way, it's like tuning into different waves to surf in any given moment of how could I be more resourced here? How can I be more resourced in my life? And as you're cultivating that wellness, if you will, which is very Virgo, in a way that actually hits, in a way that actually resonates with wellness. So not just the concept, not the grasping and fussing and trying to make things perfect in a way where you're actually frazzled and stressed out. But I mean, when you're really like an artist of the craft of feeling good and you're in those feeling good states, notice what opportunities become available to you through the web of synchronicity. Notice how you end up being less preoccupied by the things that normally bother you. Notice if you access more creative or intelligent ways to move through situations that you're currently navigating. I think that the shifts that are happening that we're leading into are in service to that type of growth, right? Of maybe life gets to be more beautiful. Maybe we are on a cutting edge or a threshold where things can be better than we've imagined. So, with that optimism as my overall frame, I'll speak to some of the things that may be snagging us or coming up along the way that might feel like a direct challenge to that possibility of like, maybe now's the time to fly. So, as I was saying, Virgo is a highly sensitive sign. It is the part of us that can assess what is off, what needs adjustment, what needs to be refined. And this attention to craft is ongoing and forever. There is no arrival because life is always in flux and always changing. And therefore, our sense of refinement or our sense of what we're working on is always growing and expanding. So letting go of the fixation on arrival uh, makes things a lot better with Virgo. Um, yeah, I'm going to come back to this other thread. And this new moon is receiving contact from each outer planet, so it's also very sensitive. So there may be at least one place in your life, if not multiple, where you're especially tapped into the intricacies of process, right? This could be the house that you have Virgo in, might be the classic place that you're a little bit more neurotic in nature. So you're noticing some of the small changes or shifts or micro attuning to that. The complexity or the issue here is that this heightened sensitivity to detail that Virgo affords us is also attuned to a paradigmatic lens of what is correct or desired? What's the objective? Um, and this often has layers of unconsciousness to it. So, to what standards or mission are we calibrating? In evolutionary astrology, in the teachings by Jeffrey Wolf Green, he does place a lot of emphasis on the kind of Judeo-Christian conditioning with the Virgo Pisces axis, as in the purity consciousness that you might find in Virgo is influenced by the metaphysical ideas of what constitutes goodness and sin, say in Pisces. But if you're not operating in that frame, your idea of cleanliness or order that Virgo represents can be very different, right? Like, it's the belief or the worldview that we find in Pisces that can influence what we think refinement looks like. So we're also headed into eclipse season. The next full moon that is coming up in 2 weeks after this new moon is an eclipse. So that's going to add in another layer of sensitivity because emotions run higher in eclipse season. Eclipse seasons bring in concrete situations which trigger soul work, as in maybe it's what's happening that's like, our direct waking dream of life is activating us. But often it's actually a mismatch. Like it's what we think or what we believe is happening that we're projecting onto insufficient data points, where we kind of have like a nebulous situation playing out with a level of mystery in it, but our projection upon it shows us ourselves in the mirror. And there's a whole learning that comes from that. So this mismatch in perception and reality is important and significant because it creates our wound cycles or our karmic patterns. We unconsciously project particular stories onto reality and in some sense manifest or create our problems. So, right, like, if you've been fussing and fretting, that sometimes maybe that's the energy that you've believed you need to garner up to do a good job or to get things right, like that level of stress. But sometimes that type of stress and anxiety actually creates more problems because our frame on the situation is very unforgiving and uninspired. I forgot to say at the beginning to please like this video, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment at some point to say hi or let me know what resonates with you. So when we're projecting our unconscious, stories onto insufficient data points, the mystery inside of a developing situation in our lives, this gives us the opportunity to either, renew our lease on that karma or that loop that we're in, or to wake up inside of the story to release some of those patterns and actually wake up into a whole new reality where we don't have to carry that extra burden. We get to lighten our load. We're in a moment with the North Node in Pisces and South Node in Virgo generally. So remembering that if I share again the chart, this is the new moon chart, but see, we have South Node in Virgo and North Node in Pisces. And so eclipse season is always playing off of the lunar nodes. And that is an influence for, they're in a pair of signs for a year and a half. So we're in a ongoing story that's being more emphasized now. And this ongoing story has been that anxieties are being kicked up with the South Node in Virgo. They're being reconstellated, brought up into the air. And there is a choosing possibly of letting some of those things settle. Not by being careless, not by just, ignoring stuff or being neglectful, but it's actually more about tuning into and nurturing some of what the Pisces North Node represents, which is faith, which is trust, which is surrender. And I don't just mean like sprinkling some mantras at a situation like fairy dust and like rocking yourself with your mantras, which is a very Virgo Pisces experience. But actually like tuning into a greater field dynamic, like the ocean, finding the surf, like finding that wave of resource, pleasure, connection that actually shifts your whole perception and has you in more of a flow state with life. And noticing that's kind of always there. Like there's always that like psychedelic present moment portal, surf play part of creative life. Like it's part of the fabric of the cosmos, but we get locked out of it inside of our daily routines, our sense of ego, identity, worry, concern, survival stuff, trauma. And that constitutes the stuff that our mind is trying to figure out all the time, trying to game, being very preoccupied with. And so, a really simple example that's maybe a little bit more basic would be if you're in a dance, right? Assuming you like dance, maybe you need to heal your relationship with dance or find another flow activity. But if you're on the dance floor, what is it that enables you to move through whatever resistance and crunch is there, the parts of you that are in your head, like what do I look like when I'm moving? What do other people think about me? Do I even know how to dance? Like whatever these blocks are, or whatever the mind is like, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't like the music, etc. Versus when you drop in and you are in this kind of altered state and you're lost in the dance and you are in the flow. And the balance with Virgo Pisces as well is that you can cultivate your life so that you create relationships or environmental factors or structures in your life that actually support you going into that flow and trance state, right? You don't just have to like make do with whatever and be totally undiscerning and just find your way to love whatever's happening. Like that's a higher level spiritual thing you can also do, but it comes with a balance of you can also make your life nice. Like you can make choices, you can have things going for you in your life that enable you to drop into flow. And it's also a choice in perception to drop into that flow state. And when you combine both of those, like you are an artist of your life. So there's a trap and a diminishing return with the South Node in Virgo in particular that I want to point out, which is trying to strategize and problem solve and assess your situation when you're already deeply depleted or you're operating from a really uninspired, fear-based, anxious frame. No matter how fucking compelling and convincing it might be, which it can be, right? Like the mind works in persuasion. So that's why it kind of gets us. In that place, you end up getting neurotically fixated on your fear or what you don't want to have happen. And you might begin to view everything from that lens of control or rigidity or fixing. And this type of preoccupation limits and narrows us to such a point that we end up creating chaos from our disconnection itself, our disconnection to that greater whole that would have supported us and is always there for us, always there for us to remember. Now, Virgo does have a lot of magic to bring to the table. It's not just neurotic. Like Virgo is so conscientious, so craft oriented, exquisite with detail. But all of that is better paired with attunement and some connection to the greater magic and flow rather than spinning out in a frazzled and disconnected state and trying to use the strategy of fixing and of mentally analyzing everything to get to paradise, right? Like drop into paradise and then let your mind serve that. And this is a constant thing that we end up having to remember because it's the demands and stresses of life can always pull you back into that place of trying to fix and manage. And It's not like you are necessarily in like a beautiful, sexy trance state every moment of your day. Like you might have moments that feel like a little bit more of a grind than others. Um, but the point is cultivating that ability to get into flow, to play with life, to be enjoying your moment, and developing that as a skill and as a lifestyle and having the compounding ripple effects from that type of attunement. So, that general invite with the North Node in Pisces is to cultivate and tap into a more resource state of consciousness. It's the willingness and choice to choose the energy or frame first and then orient. This is also faith, right? Like Virgo might sometimes want to analyze the details as evidence and then deduct reasoning and come up with a conclusion. But faith is kind of like trusting in an idea or trusting in a concept and then like flowing into it. So that necessarily requires surrender because if you trust that things are going to work out, um, you might give up a lot of your preoccupation with obsessing and planning and strategizing just in case they don't. And where's the balance of what is it that is important for you to be mindful of anyway? So surrender doesn't have to mean carelessness, but it's whatever supports us in relaxing back into the oceanic currents and tapping into what's beyond and vast. And for many, this is also a tall or a tough order. It comes with its own learning curves because intoxication, delusion, unhelpful fantasies have become an opiate of choice, right? There's still a craft, Virgo, of Pisces. There's still a craft of surrender. During this eclipse season, we'll likely be facing some recalibrations of our relationship with vision and inspiration, which is the Pisces, as well as the particular craft or strategy, Virgo, that we're bringing to that endeavor. So there is a general feeling. I'm going to share the chart of the new moon again. I really was feeling a lot from this yod, right? Where we have Saturn and Neptune in Aries forming a sextile to Pluto and Aquarius. And then these planets are in conjunct the new moon in Virgo. And what I really feel when I look at that is that we might be disrupting some patterns that have to do with beginner's anxiety, right? With being new at something. There's a really deep awkwardness to Saturn in Aries right now because Saturn is about establishment and, authority and in some sense knowing what you're doing, being competent. And Aries is the fool. It's the initiate. It's the baby. It's the beginning. And so there's a lot of opportunities with Saturn and Aries to be new at something, to be trying new things. And then there's like a particular shame, Saturn, that goes with that. And then there's these anxieties that triggers with Virgo. Aries loves to jump in head first and learns by doing, whereas Virgo sometimes wants to be more prepared and be ready. And the inconjunct between Aries and Virgo points to that learning through process and the emergence, the births, Aries, that actually happen inside of process, and Virgo being that process part. So I would say that there's possibly some anxieties cropping up right now around if you're new at something, if you're doing something you haven't done before, if you're encountering a new portal or a chapter or an opening inside of yourself or in your life, there is a lot of mystery in that. And on top of the mystery is a ample projection board for our hopes and dreams and wishes, as well as our fears and anxieties. So when you're new at something, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, right? You're going to have moments that feel messy or awkward or where you're kind of like a little bit, you have to course correct. And I think there's possibly a deep kind of trauma, Pluto and Aquarius, sextile the Saturn, Neptune, and Aries of like, I messed up and then everything got ruined. Like I made one little mistake and then, it was unforgivable. A sense of like the circumstance just slipping away. And that's really heavy and really scary, right? And in a lot of cases, in a lot of moments, that's just not what's happening. It may be playing out in the story or in the reality that you've had a kind of setback or that you made a mistake and you got some feedback from reality through making that mistake and the situation took a turn that is uncomfortable. But it doesn't mean that all is lost. And having a bigger and more generous frame and a greater sense of how you're expanding can be really supportive. That's that North Node in Pisces, as opposed to getting in some kind of trauma loop vortex of, I just done fucked it up and that's it. It's over. And I'm never going to have another chance again. And blah, like all the kind of ways that we, go into that tragic slipstream. Right. In reality, the new story is too new to actually have all these data points to make such logical deductions about, hence the need for trust. And how are you maturing? How are you building new confidence and inner authority in the parts of you that are adventurous, in the parts of you that are taking risks, in the parts of you that are opening up to new experiences? Because you don't just have to like force your way through that or white knuckle it. Like you can create some embodied safety and care around the self forgiveness and acknowledgement of being new at something. By the way, in terms of like client work, that is something I really help with because I use a lot of somatic techniques that create resource and nervous system safety inside of activation and trigger. And I've found that, yeah, just applies to being able to expand in so many ways. I do that through a variety of things, but especially EFT tapping. And I offer sessions of just that. You can find it at my website. And it's also part of my one-to-one coaching Oracle body, which combines astrology, EFT, and sexological intimacy coaching. So all of those things you can find at my website, the EFT sessions, one off, or also Oracle Body. So that's at sabrinamonarch.com. So back to this thread here. Who would you be if you trusted in the best? Right? If you trusted in the best case scenario unfolding for you. Because let's say there's something that you care about, right? Something that you are invested in, something where the stakes feel high for you. And so then your mind is also coming up with these anxieties of like, what if it doesn't work out? What if it goes wrong in this particular way? And you begin arming and defending against those possibilities and contracting and whatnot. Is that serving you? Right. And what would happen? Who would you expand into if you believed that things were working out for you? Right? If you believed that you were part of an intelligent fabric that is constantly mirroring you, right? It's mirroring you inside of your stored traumas and pain and triggering you into awakening. And it's also mirroring you inside of your breakthroughs and your heart opening and your readiness to love and opening the doorway to deeper experiences of bliss, right? If you trust that the fabric of life is mirroring you and walking with you, and you begin to engage the possibility that things could be unfolding in a positive or beautiful direction, who would you be? Does arming yourself for the worst case scenario contribute to a set of behaviors that make your life overall more enjoyable? Do those positionings of defense and panic and strategy against the bad actually put you in frequency resonance with what you desire, or does it have you endlessly battling your fears and inner demons? And if you were to trust, how could you bring discernment into that? Like, let's say you trusted in the best and it didn't work out how you imagined. Could you trust yourself to carry your innocence and optimism to a new shore, a new container for it, without collapsing into the despair that you were wrong? Right? Like giving it your all, like actually going for it in life. And when you take risks where you feel invested, you will experience amazing things. Beautiful things will happen for you. And you're not guaranteed success. So sometimes things won't go the way that you want. And I had a friend one time years ago, this really stuck with me, but she told me that, when you enter into situations trusting in the best and you're more aligned with that than you are with your fear, even if things go wrong, even if things go according to your fear, you'll have more resource to bounce back and try again and move into the next beautiful chapter of your life than if you were afraid of the worst and then the worst happened and it confirmed that life is terrible and scary. It's a much harder place to bounce back from. But I think there is like a rejection sensitivity or something very, very vulnerable about actually trusting life and feeling betrayed by failures or things going wrong. And so I think that this North Node in Pisces, like part of it's making me think of having wings, of like flying, of expanding. And it's like, what if we let go a little bit more and trusted a little bit more? Right. And like that's available, like that kind of slipstream is available. And then there's also the grid of our traumas or kind of mental associations that are coming up because they're like, stay down here, like don't grow, like it's safe down here, it's safe to grip, it's safe to be scared, like listen to me, listen to the mind. And that's the kind of like, battle of forces with Pluto and Aquarius. Pluto and Aquarius is about freedom, but it's also what's keeping us not free. So anytime you do deep transformation, um, that kind of transformative thread will often vie in a power struggle with staying comfortable and safe and staying the same. And this happens in community where, people that are more iconoclastic or radical can bring up the kind of like, like the social, what am I looking for? Like contrast between tradition or changing the way that things are. But this happens at an internal psychological level too. And if you apply it to things like faith and fear, um, if you jump into, this new chapter of like beauty and possibility in your life, you may be dealing with some inner demons, the parts of you that are like, or like, they need a negotiation of what's going to help them feel safe for the software update that you're going through. Throw in a little like parts work in that. So if you trusted in the best and began to engage possibility without so much attachment to needing to know in advance that it's going to work out, how would that feel? Right? That is like a little bit of cliff jumping. That's a little bit of flying. And there's a lot of magic in that. Um, and there's certain portals in reality that open up when we take those leaps of faith. They're called, leaps of faith because you're jumping. Um, and I think about Saturn and Aries with that. And I think about calculated risk, right? Where like being trusting, like there is a naivete with Pisces that's really beautiful and at times painful. And some of the first times that we jump into that abyss with total trust, we get a lot of gems from that. And also, maybe we've been brokenhearted or very deeply disappointed and we've developed some armor. And so, as we've accumulated more baggage around just trusting and being open to the flow of life, we don't have to just like completely throw our guard, to the side and be careless and reckless. But it's like, what are some meaningful risks? What are some meaningful leaps that you are resourced and able to do? Where's that edge that you can stretch a little bit? So, a few more things for you here on this new moon. Depending on your personality or your tendency for neuroticism, or where this plays out specifically in your life, maybe the house ruled by Virgo, maybe whatever. These could be micro concerns at the moment, or they might feel vast, right? It is a very sensitive new moon. It's in conversation with all the outer planets, so small things will feel very big. But this could be a higher level moment of evolution on the spiral of your evolution where you begin to notice like little anxieties that feel big, that you used to ignore or override, but you notice them now and you can't ignore or override them like you used to. And that's good. That's a form of growth. The ask or the creative mission here could be to opt out of some of these paradigmatic lenses and, that are causing you pain and suffering and fall back into a deeper field of resource. So somatically, I practice this. I do a lot of different like embodiment practices and like play in different somatic states, but tuning into a body sensation that feels good and tracking it and like letting it expand and move and going on a journey with it is a really great way to be resourced. That can also look like playing with ideas that feel enlivening as opposed to the ones that feel deadening, or engaging in play and trance when you can follow the pleasure of movement in water, or the feelings of vibration in your body when you hum, or so on. My friend and I were swimming yesterday in the ocean here, and I'm obsessed with the sun. I love going on energetic meditations with the sun. So I guided us into like a sun practice and letting the sun open up a new room in our hearts and then like swimming in the ocean inside of that room. And like, that's what I do for fun. Like it's uh, easing back into a kind of naturalness of like when you see animals play or something, like they just are kind of riffing off of what's fun to paw at. And it's like, this thing feels fun. It feels fun to move my body in this way. And you can just kind of like play with that. And it feels crunchy when we're not in the practice of that. Um, but the more that we kind of like accumulate familiar with those channels and kind of emergent improvisation with them, the easier it is to get into flow states in your everyday life. And you can always start with what's available to you. So the pattern shifting can be clunky or challenging, but say you decided to commit to enjoying your life. It is very possible to get snagged or seduced right now by big, catastrophic stories that the thing we're tracking to be off or awry is like irreparable. It's bringing up a lot of old information or old coping or survival strategies that we can actually be free of. If you're noticing them, it means you're that much closer to being free of them because you're not blended with them. Noticing implies some level of detachment. That's why it's really powerful to have some type of witnessing meditative practice where you can have some distance between you as a witness and what is running through your mind. So if you're noticing these things that are concerning you, you could look at it as you're actually on your way to freedom because you've begun that process of detachment. You can play with this lunar cycle with attuning Virgo's craft, attention, to what does it take to get into alignment with a more enjoyable, magical, and inspired life. Not only in the external jumping of hoops to get particular results and make your life better externally, which is valid, right? Like when you're creating and building your life, chances are you are an architect, you are designing experiences that you would like to live inside of. That's totally fair. But in the internal like in my words, there's also this process of internal reorientation, right? Relating to the present moment in a way that makes paradise and resource and the sublime out of the apparent nothing, or out of the fertile something that you can enjoy that much deeper, as opposed to interpreting stimuli in such a way that feeds suffering or anxiety. Now, in adverse environments, which do exist, a lot of really powerful magic has been born. Right? Like the craft of changing the energy or changing the frequency has also been there to adapt to difficult circumstances. So whether you can concretely make your circumstances better or you have to adapt the energetics, Virgo Pisces does that. And no matter how good you already are at all of this lunar cycle suggests an update in that particular craft, right? Of resonance, attunement, alignment, enjoying your life. You might make many mistakes, but instead of beating yourself up for it, what if you kept heart and kept attuning to the good? Right? Not to be so materialist or downtrodden about apparent setbacks, though they are triggering what matters to you and what you really care about. So, of course, there is emotion that comes with that. But if you could slow down the overwhelm and the catastrophization and the blowing up of these small things into something much worse, right? Like really reel that back and give some forgiveness and okayness to the messiness and clunkiness of the process. Oh, my cat just arrived. Keeping heart, keep attuning to the good. What if your sensitivity as an artist deepened and you conditioned more safety into all the awkward parts of the process that have you feeling like a total noob? Because I'm sure actually there is like a very new story with that Pluto and Aquarius sextile to the Saturn, Neptune, and Aries conjunction. It's like there's a new place that we're paving and pioneering some freedom for ourselves. And this new moon, we are a lot more sensitive to that. So it's good that there's sensitivity. It's good that there's this feedback, but find some resource in the greater field and essence and energy of your life. Don't get too myopically focused on individual data points and make them the whole universe, especially if your interpretation of that data point is horrifying, right? If you want to tune into a pleasurable data point, the taste of the food, this feeling of the sunlight, what you're witnessing and seeing around you, a sensation in your body, if you want to tune into a detail that is resourcing and expand it, like by all means, do that. It's that energy of expansion and resourcing that will make the craft part of Virgo a lot easier and a lot more attuned to the deeper, more magical thing that you're really going for. So I'm going to leave it at that and encourage you to check out my website, sabrinamonarch.com. I have astrology readings, I have EFT sessions, and I'm also offering Oracle Body one-to-one coaching longer term, combining astrology, EFT, and sexological intimacy coaching. This is actually especially for the highly sensitive people, because with astrology, we map so much exquisite, sophisticated nuances of our experience. And the same can be done internally through somatic journeys, somatic practices that allow us to get to know ourselves as a body. And as you begin to build more bridges between that information that lives in the body and that higher information that we find with astrology, that just opens up such an exquisite adventure. And I find that um, these embodiment threads are very resourcing, in particular for people that are looking for answers through astrology. Because we definitely will find a lot of insight with astrology, and we can be very electrified and moved. That's what I love about this language and why I share it and serve it. But when that map takes you to a territory and you want to jump deeper into the depth and richness of your experience and be grounded inside of it and capable inside of it, that's where somatics is really helpful. So Oracle Body is a beautiful blend of all of that. It's a one-to-one coaching container. You can read more about it on my website and apply there. Thank you so much for listening. Do like this video, leave a comment, let me know how your new moon is going, or if you have any intentions for the new moon, if you're just going to see where things take you. And yeah, I'll leave it at this. Thank you so much.